With so much data flowing freely across the internet and with so many technologies evolving that can easily manipulate it, the time has come to think about the quality of the data and how it is secured and managed. Big data is fast becoming a catchphrase to infer superior information. But having a large sample size is not helpful if the numbers are inaccurate and they don't truly represent what we think we are measuring. The Financial Review also said, business and technology companies need to put infrastructure in place that doesn't just supply data, but also attests to the security and the truthfulness of the data. If data is truly going to be the currency of the new millennium. Manak Mazumdar is a data and research expert who expressed concern even more forcefully. He gave a TED talk titled, "Bad Data Keeps Us from Good Artificial Intelligence." AI is only reinforcing and accelerating our biases at speed and scale with societal implications. As a data scientist, I'm here to tell you it's not the algorithm, but the biased data. We're spending time and money to scale AI at the expense of designing and collecting high quality and contextual data. The magical image of computers has given us an unjustified faith that the technology will iron out any problems with data. But garbage in means garbage out. The early pioneer of the digital programmable computer, Charles Babbage, was flabbergasted when on 2 occasions he was asked, "Pray, Mr. Babbage, if you put into the machine wrong figures, will the right answers come out?" Babbage commented later, "I am not able rightly to comprehend the kind of confusion of ideas that could provoke such a question." It's not just needing good data, it is also critical to be utilising the right data. The Grattan Institute has produced some very constructive reports. Their recent report on the reasons for gridlock in our policy development is essential reading. But in an earlier work, I think the data they used was large in number, but too narrow in its scope. In their publication, Stuck in Traffic, Road Congestion in Sydney and Melbourne, they focused on car trips to the city CBD. While they had access to tens of thousands of records over a long period, these are not the majority of trips, and they don't fully represent the entire metropolitan area. Despite commonly held perceptions, I'm not condemning Grattan, just striving to ensure we don't see one characteristic as representing the whole. Professor David Henscher, the founder and director of the Institute of Transport and Logistics Studies, puts this into perspective.
It's quite misleading, actually, because there's far more trips to the shops, social, recreational, personal business, dropping kids off at school than there are commuting trips these days.
We should not seek more data just to refine our preconceived ideas, which have centred around the weekday peak. Liz Ant is an international expert in specialist transport surveys.
Quite often, ministries of transport think that the journey to work is the determinant of all road building, cycle path building, footpath building, but in many cases, the journey to work is not the time of major traffic on a road, and I take traffic in the broader sense, but walking, cycling, driving, because I'm sure that you can think of examples where congestion on the weekend is even greater than congestion on parts of the network. Congestion on the weekend is greater than in what we call the AM, the morning peak.
New data should help us understand new concepts. The general business community understands this. Data analytical skills are increasingly in demand.
It's become, after finance, the most important specialisation for our postgraduates in their commerce and business degrees. The biggest objective is to train graduates to understand data, to interpret data, and to use data in some form of formal modelling in a way that adds value to understanding the problem at hand. What we don't want is people that just like crunching numbers without really understanding the purpose, which is a bit of an issue with a lot of the big data area at the moment. We're bombarded with data, but is that data useful? And what do we do to add value?
Data science is not just about averaging more numbers, but how we look at a wide variety of information that comes with sets of numbers. In 1952, the US Air Force discovered the extreme dangers of relying on averages. As they were developing the use of jet engines, they were experiencing a large number of crashes, killing pilots and destroying equipment. At its worst point, 17 pilots crashed in a single day. They looked for problems with the pilots, the training, and the commanders of the squadrons. Fortunately, around the early 50s, the Air Force hired a 23-year-old scientist, Gilbert S. Daniels. Daniels is reported to have said, "When I left Harvard, it was clear to me that if you wanted to design something for an individual human being, the average was completely useless." In the planes, the cockpit seats were designed after extensive measurements of 10 key physical characteristics of many pilots. The cockpit seats were then fixed in position based on the average of these measurements. The result suited no one. When adjustable seats were installed, the crash rate declined enormously, and among other things, this opened the way for women pilots. We at Austraffic have now started a webpage called Anything But Average to promote the need to overcome systemic problems in the way we collect, store and use data.
We can all learn from other experiences. Austraffic has had the chance to observe at the operational level from within the AFL Women's Competitions Premiership team. Whilst the media focus can often be about the top teams, the marquee players and finals contention, what we've seen is an organisation that measures a wide range of important factors, from complex analysis of team and player performance to the sport's wider impact on participation and growth. For example, total AFL participation in Australia of all genders is now over 1.6 million, and that's outside of the 18 fully professional clubs. This number includes community clubs, school programs, and even record growth internationally. The AFL Women's Competition has played a key role in contributing to the increased number of females playing the game, now surpassing 40% at grassroots level. In another key milestone, this year's women's competition attracted a total TV audience of over 5 million people. That's a 35% increase on 2020 and a 49% increase from 2019. Equally as impressive, in this first year that matches were ticketed, 13 sold out, and AFLW membership numbers reached an all-time high. The recent expansion announcement will mean that for the 2023 season, all 18 AFL clubs will now have a women's team.
Why people play or don't play a sport is often much more than whether the team is winning. In a similar way, why people do or do not make a trip is more than a simple assessment of the time and cost of a service. The next critical step then is to not just measure the resultant trip, but measure the reasons and factors in deciding how and when we travel. Liz Amp's special area of expertise is household transport surveys, where you measure in detail what are the situations and opportunities in households that lead to the trips that are made.
If you just look at patterns of people's trips, you have no idea why they're doing it, and therefore you can't use any of that data really for planning.
We asked Michael Caltabiano, the CEO of the preeminent research body in Australia, ARRB, about the need to understand people, not just be fascinated with technology.
That is the direction of the future, David. I mean, behaviours, why people do what they do when they interact with a transportation system is something that we've at Arbath very focused on. We have actually got psychologists within the business unpacking those stories and journeys, why people want to do what they want to do, so that we can enable those journeys. So as a community and as a society, we should be enabling those mobility journeys. We should be ensuring that people can get to where they want to get to in the cheapest, most efficient way possible.
ARRB has just employed Jeff Doyle, a senior executive, to lead its new infrastructure management group. Maynard Mazumdar mentioned context. If we keep the data we collect, as we should, we must ensure that we document the context in which the numbers were collected. There is no better example than measuring what is happening during the various phases of the COVID pandemic. The impact of COVID will not suddenly stop. So I believe we need to keep measuring what is happening so that we understand the magnitude of the impacts compared to societal factors. Another critical step then to overcoming current problems is a more open and thoughtful approach. That means better discussion and processes to the way we allocate funds. For example, recent government budgets have made big allocations to transport construction projects. Michael Caltabiano also sees the need to spend enough money to have the best information and methods to pick the best projects.
Now, you've hit the nail on the head for our next journey. As part of this integrated mobility journey is we must audit. We must understand when we put $2.2 billion into new safe system outcomes in rural and regional Australia, it's not good enough to just go and, as you say, cut the ribbon on all of those new pieces of work. We must go back every year. We must monitor how many accidents and incidents have occurred on these new pieces of work. We must learn from the system changes and continually improve.
It's not hard to see the principles we should be pursuing, such as respect the need for quality data, not just a lot of numbers. Commit resources to ensure quality data. Include surveys of the environmental factors that lead to travel. Document context information as an essential part of a data set. Carry out audits of completed projects to test our predictions. But what can we do specifically? We should actively look for opportunities too. Report on the time consumed to overcome bad data. Report on the time consumed to try and find appropriate data. Document problems with data sets. When we use a data set, document the activities that it may not be measuring, even if they are assumed to be small in number. When we are asked to reduce the cost of collecting data, ask what compromises they are prepared to accept and document them. Support auditing, even if it highlights errors or unintended outcomes. This is an ongoing exercise. Here are a few things we might address in more detail. If government pays for a project and that project collects some data, who checks that that data is accurate and representative? And if the government pays for a project and that includes data collection, why should that information not be put on the public record as a condition of the contract? Data is the currency of the new millennium, so it has to have inherent value. We need to have a revolution of thinking, and the first step is better data science.